Welcome to BrandBusters with your hosts, James Schwinn and Sean Lee. Together, we bust open the latest in CPG, retail media, and life, or whatever the we want. And for today's episode, we got something special cooked up for ya. Extra spicy. Take it away, Sean.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the latest episode of BrandBusters. And we have an awesome guest today. We have Dylan Menter, who is the founder of BrandBusters, the world's first creatine gummy, which I know has been a hot segment recently. And he's the host of the How To Entrepreneur podcast, a SpaceX alum, and a veteran having served in the Marine Corps. We're super excited to have you on the show, Dylan, and really excited to learn from you and talk about what you've built at BrandBusters.
Yeah, guys, it's quite the intro. It's like I was just waiting for you to say where I went to high school.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's cool to be here with you guys.
We could have dug a little deeper too.
Yeah.
Shame on you.
Exactly.
Well, let's dive in. I mean, let's kind of tell the world about BrandBusters. Like, what was the motivation behind founding the brand? Like the application, obviously, supplements and creatine seems to be such a hot category right now. But like, tell us, like, what is the origin story here?
Yeah, so there's definitely like a catalyst to starting the whole brand, the product, the idea behind the product. There is that like almost quintessential like moment in time, but I've always kind of been in some sort of like entrepreneurial hustler. Like I've always been in that motion even since I was younger. For better or worse. And I don't tell that side of the story, but it does kind of lead up to me always trying to figure out some way to make some more money. The lower middle income class is where I came from. My parents, for reference, they don't have the house anymore. Weren't even able to keep it. That's sort of my upbringing. But, fast forward to, I think it was 2017. I get out of the Marine Corps. I've got a little bit of aviation and electromechanical experience. And by the grace of God, I get hired here as a technician. And I end up forming this group of guys, workout buddies, this group of us that would go from Maine, which is what they call the primary Hawthorne SpaceX building, to the 24-hour fitness, the world-class 24-hour fitness in Hawthorne. And for anyone who's unfamiliar with the area, it's pretty close to maybe not the worst part of Compton, but maybe not the best. So, going to the gym after work was always a treat. But I had a buddy, Andrew. Andrew is one of like five of us, and we all take creatine. I actually solely responsible, and I will take full credit for this. I got basically anybody that worked out at SpaceX at Maine near me in my lane hooked on creatine. One, because I was jacked and I was stronger than everyone, so they always asking me like diet advice and what kind of supplements am I taking, or what kind of steroids am I using, So Andrew goes to scoop his creatine into his shaker one day, completely misses, blasts himself in the chest with it, like literally, picturesque moment. It looks like a puff of gun smoke, like from an old musket went off, and everyone just starts ragging on him like you would normally do if someone did something stupid like that. Lo and behold, he goes home. He tells his wife at the time about it, and she ends up telling him, "Oh, if you can't take the powders, you should just get the gummies." And he comes back to work and tells us that the next day. And we're all like, oh, yeah, whatever. Well, we like to keep good jokes running. So I go home that day after work and I try to find these things online. And mind you, it's 2017. Like Gully Gummy has taken off. The boom's kind of booming. And I'm on the first page of Google and I'm like, oh, wow, I really can't find these things. And this was back before I was like every other American, in the sense of like Amazon is sort of the path of least resistance to buying stuff. At the time, I wasn't buying supplements there, but I went there and looked for the gummies and I couldn't find them there either. And I was like, this has got to be, this doesn't make any sense. I've been taking creatine for, since 2009. It's 2017. I'm like, why, how has no one put this into, this form factor yet? And that's sort of the story behind the, initial spark. I call him my dad. My dad has been as entrepreneurial as I have in his adult life. And he is someone who I wouldn't ask my dad for a lot of advice or opinions on too many things, as maybe I wouldn't ask him how to fix something at work or uh, maybe had to do calculus or help me with my calculus homework. But when it comes to these like novel business ideas, he's had a ton of them. I call him up. He's like, "What do you mean there's not a creatine gummy?" And he's like, "Have you done?" Yeah, it sounded like something that you're like when your dad's like, "What do you mean? Like, what are you talking about?" Like that was literally what happened, and it was actually his advice to. He goes, "You should try to patent something or get some sort of trademarks around the IP and see if they'll actually hold and you can start building this thing." And that is what started the rest of my late 20s, early 30-year-old life, right there.
That's awesome.
So
what a crazy like gap in the market too, especially with gummies exploding everywhere at the time. And James and I have both taken supplements since we were in high school. So, for how many people take creatine and protein and everything else, the fact that it didn't exist, like what an awesome insight at the right time.
What a sign. It's just like a glaring hole looking back at me, like in the search results or like lack of search results.
So behind like some of the trends, right? I feel like gummies have been like popping off for like the last several years. Obviously, Goalie kind of catalyzed that. Just from like a bioavailability standpoint, like any benefit, like powder versus gummy, like application, like is it all semantics, or do you think like what has the highest efficacy?
I wish. Yeah. So there's some studies on this, and like when I was writing our patent, I'm looking at all these. Like Goalie has a patent. Like I've read that thing 100 times back to front, and you start to like deviate from like the manufacturing of things and consider the efficacy of your product and does it even work in a gummy. You learn about the different pH levels and the acidities when you're working with pectin. You're just like, I don't remember creatine tasting sour in the least bit when or at least it shouldn't. That's probably a telltale sign that you should not continue use if your creatine powder is sour. But so you look into the efficacy of these products in gummy form and you start to look for these studies, and it's just as simple as going on PubMed, using your quotations and adding creatine and then digestion, efficacy. Those three terms alone will probably generate every study there's ever been done. And I think at the time when I was initially researching this, there was less than a dozen that had any substantial data markers. And creatine, every supplement's going to be different. Every molecular compound is going to be different when it comes to the GI tract, digestion and uptake, and irritability, all these other things that are associated with sort of what we expect from our supplements and like byproducts of taking them. So there was a powder study, and it basically said that, they tested all these different creatines and none of them had any more uptake monohydrate, I think ranked number one in form of uptake, or creatine HCl in mono. Those were the two that ranked the highest. It might've been side by side, but then you have like all these other esters and methylated versions of it and things that are supposed to be like enhanced from a bioavailability perspective. And, they were just right underneath good old monohydrate. So there were those powder studies, but there was no gummy studies. And this was still like, earlier in the gummy boom, I guess. The creatine gummy, I wouldn't be surprised if the guys over at the International Society of Sports Nutrition, the ISSN, are actually trying to do a study on this now, or like trying to get the funding for it, because it would be such a hot paper.
Yeah.
Where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, separate of like creatine, I mean, I feel like sports supplements, performance supplements, everything is, I feel like a lot of these brands, like I look at like the Universal Nutritions of the world, who I think had a very like, you think some of like the marketing positioning, like very kind of extreme, like very like kind of muscly guys that are featured on that. But now I think there's like a broader use application, kind of like the average active lifestyle person. But with that, there's been a surplus of brands that have sprouted up. Like, which ingredients or products do you feel like are legitimate versus what is just straight bullshit, snake oil?
Yeah, no, that's a fucking, excuse my language too. That's a great fucking question. And that's why it's awesome that companies like Now Foods are like sort of doing this like undercover boss level of reporting, where they're just using Eurofins, or they're not using Eurofins. They're using their own testing facilities to determine what is actually on the shelf. And I'm going to speak more to the Eurofins, that part of the dichotomy on the testing level or testing world. But I think what you should be doing as a consumer, or even a brand owner or someone in product development, is working with branded ingredients. And there's a few reasons why. So you can get creatine from China. You can get it from Creapure in Germany. Creapure also has warehousing here in America. So, there's tons of ways to get different creatines, and the things that I would consider quality or up to standard for me personally, someone who is paying and expecting benefits, paying a premium price point for products because we want that experience, right?
Yeah.
The product's got to be branded. Like the ingredients, they have to be branded. The active ingredients, like 9 out of 10 times, unless it's something like maybe a vitamin C, like, something that's been around for 100 years and you can find it in just about anything. And there doesn't need to be like some premium level of uptake or efficiency from supplementation. Like sports nutrition, especially 100% of the time, branded ingredients, those are the only things that I would trust. And like I mentioned, you can get your creatine from China, and I've had it tested. I've had creatine from China because we used to get our creatine from China when I first started making gummies in house, and we had it tested, and I was just like, well, there's some stuff in here that I didn't necessarily expect to be in here, and that was partially because I was just younger and manufacturing and sourcing and just naive in that sense. But there were also like levels of certain things that were just a lot higher than they should have been, and I'm not talking about the creatine. So. Yeah. You've got quality of ingredients. You've got the dosing. Like I think that some companies that fail these Now Foods tests, it's not because they're not buying the right amount of ingredients and putting them in their product, and with an overage that's going to avoid any sort of degradation, lowering. But it's just that the manufacturing of the raw ingredient isn't as pure as it could or should be, and Now Foods is. It's the last time I'm going to say Now Foods because it's starting to sound like they've sponsored me, but I love Now Foods because they do test at their own facilities, and they've got it's almost a non-biased approach to all of this. There could be, who knows, maybe they're going to come out with a creatine gummy sometime too, and then it's they do another report. But I really do think that some of the companies that are testing at other facilities, like Eurofins, for instance, they're taking benchtop samples, not samples from the manufacturing run. They're overdosing the heck out of them. They're sending them in. They're getting these lab reports that say they've got, their 15 or 12% overage. And that's what they post on their websites. That's what they share, in public forum. And it's just, I know it's not true because I know for a fact this stuff is happening behind the scenes, and it's not because companies want to do that. It's because they have to do that. Like they've got their sourcing, they've got this whole they've got this whole flow built out with the product dev, and it just sometimes it comes up short from the line, especially when you're making things like food products or food grade products. You're working with a lot of heat, a lot of liquid. It's just like cooking a vegetable. You're just nuking nutrients out of it, whether you're getting some, if not most, but it's never going to be like eating something raw.
So once you had this idea, you saw that there was a gap in the market for a creatine gummy, what was your next step? How did you go from like, hey, this is a good idea, this is a gap, to finding a contract manufacturer and getting prototypes created and actually start selling for paying customers?
Yeah, I wish it was like some ephemeral like story, like, oh, I just called the manufacturer and I got it made. But it was actually like the quintessential, like, this is the most difficult story, pushing the rock uphill, sort of like perfect Netflix movie scenario that could have happened. And I know this is going to resonate with a lot of other entrepreneurs that don't come from like maybe an entrepreneurial background or like a financially advantageous background. Like sometimes you can pay to learn, you can pay to get the shortcuts, or you can pay through all the mistakes and just the setbacks from trying to learn things on your own with what's available online or Twitter. So I took my dad's advice.
I'm a glutton for punishment. I feel like I only learn through making my own mistakes and then never doing that again.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a serendipitous story, but it was just a lot of me spending every waking moment alive outside of work trying to figure out how to write a patent, because I couldn't necessarily afford to pay for it. trademarking things, because I knew it was just a matter of time before someone else jumped in the space. And if at least when you have some IP around it, even if it's not the strongest, you can usually keep someone from running ads somewhere or posting something online. Or Shopify DMCA has gotten pretty good now with just like taking things down. So, it was less of a aggressive move to like own the market or try to monopolize it, but I really just wanted to protect this first mover that I knew I had at the time. And once I sort of learned my way around the IP processes that we could use, because it's very hard to get certain things on the primary register trademark wise, and some things you just can't patent. So like it literally, I spent like a year learning this stuff, and God, I don't know how it's possible, but no one else had gotten to market still within this year. I was able to get all this stuff signed, sealed, delivered, and that's when I almost feel like it was the next big mistake, like learning the patent process and the trademarks and writing them all and getting them through the USPTO was the biggest headache and pain in the ass. But then I went ahead and I cracked open confectionery cookbooks for gummies, and for working with pectin particularly. And granted, these things are not one-to-one when it comes to working with nutritional sports supplements, and how like I had no idea how creatine was going to affect the pectin setting up in the actual confectionery process. But I literally started almost illegally, I think, downloading these confectionery cookbooks. Like I'm searching for PDFs for things that aren't even in English and trying to transcribe them. And, shout out to those cookbooks, because I saved a ton of money and I learned so much about that process that I'm not just like I'm not the creatine gummy guy in my head. I'm a gummy guy. Like I know gummies. I know the gummy world. I know the products. I know what's probably not gonna hold up on the shelves, and I know what potential products there are to go after in the market once something starts trending. Like it's very easy for me to look at something that's hot on TikTok and say that would work in a gummy for this reason. You would need these sweeteners, flavors, natural ingredients to sort of, because it's going to be bitter, all these things. So it really set me up to just work with gummies long term. And I think that's kind of where my feet are rooted at the moment. But I learned how to make this gummy at home on my fucking counter like an asshole. And it took me like 8 months to do it. I spent so much money on shit creatine, good creatine, trying to figure out, is it the creatine? Why is this not working? Is it the there's 100 different types of creatine out there, or 100 different, brands you can buy from on Amazon. There's different types of pectin, and then there's different subtypes of pectin. And it's like even sugar and sugar-free ingredients act completely different. And so it's just like literally 8 or 12 months of me trying to get these gummies to set up, taste good. We wanted to use a natural blue, which was another big mistake, because blue is like blue doesn't exist out there in nature. Like if you can tell me where you see blue growing out of the ground, tell me, because it won't be after I'm done with it. But yeah, so there was that whole like do it at home, DIY, every single bit of the process, and I'm for it. But there's been other people that have cut that time to market down by 2 years just by throwing a bunch of money at it. And it wasn't easy. And then it just gets all the way up into, so we've got the IP, we've got the product development, and then we've got you've got to get to market. And by getting to market, I mean you've got to get online and in retailers. And at 2017, 19, that's really when like I feel like the expos of the world, like Expo West and all these other like big intro opportunities for brands kind of started to just get a little weaker. And like you needed to make a lot more noise online. Like, and COVID definitely kind of like, it didn't kill the expos, but I don't think they'll ever be what they were. And that's coming from someone who did a show at the expos, the fitness expo here in LA, Expo West. I think it was 2020, and people were like, oh my God, we just don't know what happened. And I'm expecting a bunch of retailers to pop up, and you've got the world first creatine gummy. It's got this badass packaging and this awesome, custom mold. And it wasn't like that. We scored like 2 or 3 retailers off our first Expo West. It's a $10,000 show. I don't got $10,000 at the time, but we do it anyways. And so it's just getting online and like learning me and my fiance. Yeah, no, it's just a different landscape now. And
We, I'm on the board of a company that recently got into Walmart, and I'm involved with a distributor that has some clients, like they'll basically want to look at your Shopify sales data and your Amazon sales data and use that as like a predictor of whether or not it'll be successful. So I feel like gone are the days of like, showing up to Expo West or some of the shows and a buyer just walking by and being like, this looks interesting. Like they want to see your actual sales data, your by zip code sales data, and see if it's going to be a fit for their store.
Yeah, that like a traditional paradigm that's almost like I feel like that's not our generation. Like that truly wasn't my generation. When we started the company, like it's a different subcategory of like manufacturers and ingredient providers that really prosper from being at those shows, as opposed to like the brands. Unless you're there to just make content, then you can go there and spend $40,000 on an awesome setup and have a effing party with your product. And I think that's where maybe the majority of the value lies with those things now. But yeah, because you're right. Anyone that is going there to look at your brand, they've seen your TikTok shop sales. They know your Amazon sales. They're not even spy tools. There's just tools now that kind of pull back the iron curtain on everybody. But yeah, so my fiance and I, we did all the branding for everything, built the website, did all the custom coding. We've got a developer now we work with, and we have some more complicated stuff. But we learned a lot. Went to the whole school of hard knocks with sort of like digital advertising, and to this day, like I still am capable of running Google, Amazon, and Facebook, but it's not necessarily something I want to do at the scale we're at anymore. But we've just done it all ourselves, and it's been fun.
Kind of going on like channel mix, like how's it evolved from like launching to today? Like, do you see bulk of sales? Like you're kind of speaking to the importance of digital recently, but like, do you still see good traffic via brick and mortar, or you guys have heavily indexed digitally, and like which marketplaces?
Yeah, great question. Especially for like anyone that isn't just thinking about maybe siloing one channel for growth from the get-go, which personally I'm glad that we kind of did, but I think we may have picked the wrong channel to start off. We were very Google heavy at first, and it really helped with like online search presence, obviously. But back then, Meta was so much of a gold mine. I don't think we could have kept up with it at scale, but it would have pushed the company a lot further along a lot sooner. But nowadays, my primary focus is Meta. I think probably 2/3 or 3/4 of all of our advertising spend monthly goes towards that. And when some people have seen this sort of climb in acquisition costs, we've actually seen the exact opposite. And it's hard to pinpoint sort of what's going on and why. But it's, kind of designated that part of the channel mix just crop or the cream that rose to the top, because yes, it started off expensive, but it's only gotten cheaper for us. And I think we've just gotten better at running ads. There's been more and more changes in the health and wellness space as far as Meta nowadays, especially like more recent as of like December, January, February. I think there's been a lot of auction kind of made available because some of these companies just aren't allowed to advertise like they were, and maybe they'll circumvent it or find a way around it, or Meta will put something in place that kind of brings things back to where they were in terms of competitiveness in the auctions. But yeah, I would say 2/3, 3/4 is there every month. And then the vast majority of what's left, maybe like, let's say up to 90%, is Amazon PPC, which it could be a lot more. I know this for a fact. I don't spend as much time in Amazon, and we don't have someone in place running it in-house or an agency, for instance, yet. But I'm hoping to change that this year, because I think that we've left a lot on the table, but we're still in a great place from a P&L point. So I'm not, it's something that should have more focus, but it doesn't. And then Google Ads, it's kind of a shit show. Like, I don't even think people are using Google to search anymore. They're using like ChatGPT, and it's just.
I think Google's business model is going to dramatically have to change, right? Because especially for consumer goods products, because I just saw a stat that it's like 90% of people go to Amazon to search first if they're looking for a consumer good product. They're not even going to Google anymore. And then likewise with Meta being as targeted as it is, like what you're doing is very similar to every other brand that we've had on here. I would say it's either majority Amazon and then Meta, or majority Meta and then Amazon, and then kind of all other is a smaller bucket.
So we get away from TikTok, or I'm currently just distancing ourselves from it. This year we're going to take a new approach, but last year we did, I think, what every brand kind of thought to be just like best practice, and that was to send a shit ton of product out, get some organic content in. This is all TikTok shop creators. And what we saw as a result of sending out like 100 free bags a month was almost zero sales, no viral content. And this was like, there were like 3 months out of last year where we did this, because it was kind of because of an inventory thing. Also, just we felt like it could be refined, and we kept trying to reshape it as we were, weren't seeing like these high levels of success, like brands like Brez, or just like these other new to market or new to TikTok shop companies that sort of blew up. And I know now sort of how they did it, but in hindsight, it doesn't help me. It doesn't help me last year. But yeah, so this year we're gonna take a pretty aggressive approach.
What do you think the main reason is for? Because I've dabbled in TikTok shop. I know a ton of people that are very interested in it. But what do you think the main reason for sending out 100 kind of free bags a month and not getting great content was attributed to? Just selecting the wrong people, or are they just people that are taking the free samples and not actually producing anything? Like what do you think is the big driver? It may be many drivers, but just curious if you have any thoughts on it.
No, strong mix of both of those things. Also, like you've got to have some organic clout on the platform as well. Like it doesn't hurt so the brands that I know that successfully sort of like kicked ass last year, and they saw these huge surges, is from they're garnering their own creator community, or they're utilizing like Discords full of creators. And if you're just relying on the platform, you're going to get a bunch of low performing, sort of low quality, and that's all native to the platform, but it's just not what sells the best. There are communities full of creators that actually sell the best, and they're all accessible for these like backdoor deals that you've got to do with them. Like the creators that have hundreds of thousands in GMV, they're not even going to respond to your freaking, here's my free product, please make a video request. They're getting paid behind the scenes. They've almost got, like a salary in place, so to speak. But there's that.
I think that's a huge insight for people trying to break into it and who might be struggling, because I've heard that multiple times now.
Yeah, that, and then TikTok won't push your shop unless you've got like 50 5-star reviews, and like you can gamify it. You can game TikTok shop. I'm just gonna here's a little bit of sauce for anyone who like hasn't been able to crack it. Like I know for a fact there's people out there that are pretty much buying their own product and sending it to creators in return for these 5-star reviews. Like it's all set up on the back, in the background, obviously. But that's a good way to get your shop the traction it needs to position itself for the actual traffic that you're expecting from sending out product. People will want to work with you if you've got those 55 stars.
Yeah, I think so. Agency I'm at, we have a TikTok shop arm. I think social influencer is completely foreign territory to me. I know marketplaces very well. That's been kind of the learning curve, but I think the amount of brands that try to go about like sourcing and vetting the right like nano influencers, just to your point, like the major ones with all the GMV, like they're not going to partake. So how do you source properly and also develop like affiliate briefs? So actually turning one piece of UGC into like 10, because I think that's the other missed opportunity. A lot of brands are just hoping and relying on the creator. Well, their creators should come up with stuff. You have to make it as turnkey and frictionless for them as possible. Agreed. And understand like what's resonating based on your data and also like what you're seeing from competitors, and draft that, because that's going to turn, increase the likelihood of virality or other impressions going on. So again, based on what Dylan's saying, 100%. And then equipping the influencers or the affiliates, like that's what gives you your best shot.
Yeah, can't stress how important the actual scripts are. That's kind of like some people, they hire script writers. Like once they've got the money, or like say they go out and get funding, like one of their first hires will be a legitimate script writer, because controlling and creating your narrative digitally is probably the most important thing, especially if you've ever plan on doing a TV commercial, like you're not gonna like I'm not gonna sit down and write the script no matter how much I know creatine and fitness and wellness. Like I'm just you really need to nail it.
I think an interesting insight there on script writing is like even early on as the founder, if you're writing a script for influencers, like write the script so you know it because you know the product better than anybody else out there. Like one of the things I founded a brand called Zevo in the insect space back in 2017 in Procter & Gamble venture capital wing. And we like basically, I actually hired a guy who was really good in this, but we collaborated and we wrote a 2-minute late night TV infomercial script and like actually got it produced and like ran it. But like that 2-minute script that we refined and like were able to like prove out that people would actually call in to the number or like go to the website and buy it. Like we figured out we pretty much nailed the entire narrative. So we could take that 2 minutes and we could, pick the things that really resonated and turn it into our digital ads. We could cut it down and give it talking points to our influencers. Like, but we spent a ton of time really trying to nail that pitch and that script. And that was the basis for why I think we were successful because we were super crisp on, what the problem was, how we helped solve the problem and kind of the reasons to believe why our product solves the problem.
Yeah. So were you guys using it as like performance creative too, or was it just like the top of funnel stuff okay, cool.
Yeah. We were using it as performance too. we hired that whole world was so foreign to me, but we would basically buy like late night remnants. So we'd be on like Fox Business or like it's basically where like the My Pillow guy would be. You buy these TV spots for like $5 because they didn't sell them, so they would take whatever money you were willing to pay for it, and then we would basically have phone numbers and different like URLs for each of the spots that we could manage or basically manage whether or not people were buying, how much they were buying, doing all that. So it was an early like performance indicator for us. Later on, it became a top of funnel thing, but it helped us kind of prove out the thesis early on. It was something I was not very familiar with, but was relatively.
How much did you guys spend like $200K on it? Yeah.
No, like I think the first run we did, we spent like 25 or 40K.
Okay. And it lasted the test of time.
Yeah. And it worked. And then
worth it.
later on, we kind of kept that. We might have modified the ad a little bit, but we started to still take that same approach. It was less about like direct response and more just buying the remnants for top of funnel with like the really good pitch, in addition to all the other stuff we were doing on Meta and other channels. But it was pretty interesting. But I think getting the script right is huge, especially as the founder. The product better than anybody else. So I always try to like push founders to like at least participate in that or guide that versus trying to outsource it to a creative or an agency that might be like a 22-year-old trying to write a script for your product.
100%. Now talking about,
I think there's very, very,
As I say, so for emerging brands, Dylan, obviously CAC is something that everyone's like monitoring. How do you think about like actually leveraging Meta or relying? Amazon's a great conversion channel. It's not a great like top of funnel. It's an expensive kind of CAC channel initially, but how do you think about keeping that in check? And obviously it's not going to be always high into perpetuity, but like how can brands who need to get traction right, sooner than later think about that kind of equilibrium of like CAC to LTV?
Yeah, it's definitely a generation demand game, right? So that's why we focus so much on Meta, because even though we're not, we don't have these $20,000, $25,000, $200,000 top of funnel commercials that we can slice and dice, we can take, pieces of content that cost near to nothing to make in-house, and we can do hundreds of them, monthly, and we can test. Like right now, I think we've got like 11 or 1,200 ads running for our company. If you look at our Facebook ad library, and Meta and its demand generation, the ability there, I know people are thinking of, no one under the age of like 40s on Facebook anymore. And Instagram's got this like huge slice of the pie that was taken by TikTok. True and true. Like I'm rarely on Facebook looking at, friends from high school, and I'm very conscious of what TikTok has done to sort of the Meta ethosphere, but you've got to just rely on a channel, whether it's Meta or not, to generate as much as demand as you can for the cheapest amount of money possible to get the greatest amount of money out of that machine. And there's definitely levels to this. Like I think that for brands going from 0 to 10 million, That was the answer for us. Like, just make a shit ton of Facebook ads. Try to get as much creative as you can and diversified creative as you can into Meta, because you're going to reach the broadest, end audience possible. But you'll see your Google CAC, your search term quantity is going to go up. People are going to start looking for you everywhere. Your Amazon sales go up because some people only buy on Amazon, but they'll see you on Facebook. So that Facebook is still the best opportunity and sort of the gold standard when it comes to demand generation for brands under 10 million. It's a different conversation now.
How important, you talked about running a ton of ad content and creative, like how important has creative volume been for you guys? Like it seems like, as everybody else is complaining about cost of acquisition going up on Facebook, has creative volume helped you guys find the sweet spot to drive down your costs, do you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, my experience is probably going to be a bit asymmetrical from the next creatine gummy company. But in the beginning, we're based out of LA. We've got some friends in the, the sort of media space, and like, especially like digital assets. Like, we were able to get these really nice, dope videos. Like, we could have ran these things anywhere and you would have thought Procter and Gamble was behind it. So we did what, you guys did with your stuff. We repurposed it. We created stills. The videos performed like shit on Meta. Like, they just didn't get any fucking spend. And the images that we did repurpose, in our product images, which were pretty nice at the time, they didn't start performing well until we started to learn how to properly overlay sort of the right signals to Meta. Like, some of our best performing earlier ads were this high quality chopped up video stills that just said like Creapure on it, or like we've got an active ingredient profile of huperzine A, B12, and a couple other things, and like we'd list that alongside it, and like, yeah, it did good. And actually, we fucking crushed. Like, the first month we launched, like, we went from 0 to 250,000 in the first month. And like, I don't think I've never even told anybody this, I don't think, but like, we were kind of shocked.
That's a massive launch.
Yeah, it was huge. And that was when we rebranded and got these videos done and chopped up these stills. But, the CAC then at that scale, back when there was like no competition in the auction, was great. Yeah. But we're doing even better now. We're doing even better, 2 or 3 years later.
That's awesome.
Fast forward. The only difference is we're just focusing on volume, but we also know how to signal Meta a little bit better. And this is something that I think everyone needs to really remember when they're either working with performance-based creative agencies that are giving them stuff that they think is going to work, or they're making it in-house, or they're paying for it up front, is that you have sculpted your Meta audience from a conversion perspective from day one. The ads that you make will constantly send Meta in a single direction, whether it's like hyper-focused or it's a little lax. You're constantly sculpting your avatar out. So when things start to work, lean into them. Maybe be conscious of leaning into it too much, because you might silo a customer that doesn't necessarily scale the business in the way you want at the CAC you need. So there's definitely demographics that you want to scale into, and there's those that you want to stay away from on Meta that are completely different from TikTok and the other platforms.
I think that's great advice.
I would say, I mean, there's been a lot of just like great, valuable nuggets in here. So I hope you're doing a real service for, I think, the founders of the emerging brands in this space, or just trying to navigate customer acquisition. But I always love to close with a good, oh shit moment. So obviously on the entrepreneurial journey, you get one major oh shit moment, maybe 10, depending on the day or the month. Yeah. I guess any time during the journey where you felt like your back was against the ropes, and like, how did you rebound after the fact?
Yep. So there's a few that are like dire, were dire consequentially. So almost like my personal bankruptcy or shutting down the business. So I will pick just like one in particular that I think is going to have the most like learning maybe pulled from it. And that's the manufacturers that we tried to work with earlier on. When you've got a novel product like Creatine Gummies were at the time, and like I mentioned, I was in the confectionery cookbooks for a year thing. I didn't know that these manufacturers had no fucking clue what they were doing either. And And when you're just you're just Joe Schmo and you're like, I'm going to just go from making them in-house to getting them manufactured and I'm going to get rich. Like you expect these manufacturers to kind of be your North Star and like guide you in the right direction. But same with like supplements, like you just don't know what's behind the label. And if you take it for face value, you can definitely get fucked out of what you're buying. And that's exactly what happened to us. We paid $100,000 up front for some creatine gummies, didn't get shit. They lied to us. They were, hand pouring these things and sending us pictures and like, oh, we're making them. We're going to be doing the main run in a week. A week turned into a month. And then it turned into like 6 months. And we're kind of like, okay, where's the fucking product, guys? Like our partners are wanting to pull out because of us with all these false promises. And I ended up having to fly to one of the manufacturing facilities, which is maybe something you should do before they start to try to make the product so you can sort of vet them out. But then again, money was tight. We got a little bit of funding, put it into it, started building in the background. But just the oh shit moment was definitely when I went there and they showed me exactly what they had made. And I had planned to stay in town for a week or two while they made the rest. Like the big run was finally happened after like the 20th time of telling us that. And about halfway into the trip, like I started like diagnosing sort of what I was seeing in the facility. And I was like, how are you drying them like this with all this humidity in the room when creatine is susceptible to degradation under these exact conditions? It's like, how is this product even holding up? And, those guys really couldn't answer the questions. And after about a week, I was like, you just need to start making what you can now because we've got pre-orders that got to go out. And they started making product and it just like magically kind of got pulled out of their ass. And I was like, so this isn't the same product you showed me in the drying room. Like, where did this come from? And they were like, oh, well, we've been hand pouring your product, while you've been here because our production line's backed up. And I was like, well, I thought we were scheduled for these exact dates. What are you fucking talking about? And it just turned into one big lying fuck fest shit show. And we got what was left of our ingredients back, and it wasn't $100,000 worth of product and ingredients that we got back, but I had to personally get a buddy to bring a truck, like a big ass U-Haul truck to the facility. And we had to put our own shit in our truck and take it from them because they honestly, they would not, for whatever reason, like we paid for it, but they would not let us have it. It was just the biggest oh shit moment and, biggest learning experience, kind of all this. Don't trust anyone and don't expect anyone can do what they say they're going to do. And ironclad contracts have kind of been my recourse since then. And that's how we've been able to sort of stay on I think we're on like in the manufacturer's black books, like when they look at our names, they know we don't fuck around. Just I've made more alterations to contracts than pretty much write your own, when you're doing these sort of revisions when they send you their master service agreements. So just be careful out there, kids.
Man. Well, I love the rawness because I think this is the stuff that you've got the scar tissue, like, and you're still here you're still growing it. The brand is still around. It's thriving. These are the type of stories I think founders and other brands like need to hear. Otherwise they're just going to sleepwalk their way into it. So hopefully, you sharing this is helping. Hopefully someone heeds your warning when kind of navigating like manufacturer selection on that. So thanks for being raw on that.
Great. Awesome. Dylan, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think we learned a ton. I think our audience is going to learn a ton. I love how you kind of
honestly, I talk to someone like once a week and
That's great, man. Cool. Well, thanks again. If for anybody that's interested, Dylan, I imagine you're on social media. Or do you have a Twitter account or a LinkedIn account that people could follow you at if they want to?
I do. If anybody wants like any like gummy manufacturing consulting done, just a general advice, a quick phone call, or they're looking for a manufacturer, hit me up.
Cool. Yeah, give Dylan a follow.
We can hit it again if you want.
Yeah, give Dylan a follow. Reach out to him if you need to. And then, as always, if you found this conversation helpful, please share it with your friends, your colleagues, anybody you think would get value out of it, and give us a follow on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube at the BrandBusters podcast. Thanks again, and we will see you guys next time.